Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630, WMAL.
7:37 of the Morning Majority. I'm Brian Wilson. He's Brian Neiman. We are hamless this morning. There is no Mary Catherine Ham. She's off on a sort of a delayed honeymoon, and of all things, she's going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. What stories she'll have to tell when she comes back. Karen Henready is in today. She's a Republican strategist. She worked for Fred Thompson. She worked with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and this morning she's working with us, and we're glad to have you.
You two are a lot more normal and sane than some of the candidates I've worked for.
Well, that's
good to know.
And you get up earlier than one of the candidates I worked for.
We're not so sane then.
By the way, it's time now to check in with Trevor Matich and talk about that very sad excuse for a football game that took place yesterday. I want to say the Redskins report is presented by Fork Union Military Academy. Trevor Matich, where to start? It's just depressing.
It is depressing. Maybe the Redskins need to go find themselves on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. By the way, couldn't Mary Catherine have just Googled top of Mount Kilimanjaro and saved a lot of airfare?
I tried to convince her to do that, but she wanted to do it.
Yeah, the right now the thing about the Redskins, there's all kinds of people say that they aren't fighting, they aren't trying hard, they aren't. You can see them, for the most part, fighting. You can see frustration in their body language because they're not having a reward for all the work that they're putting in the form of wins. But the truth of it is, the Redskins, when fully healthy at the beginning of the season, were pretty decent, with a chance to do some things. And they did. They went 3-1. But with injuries, they're just not deep enough, and they're just not good enough. I mean, you look at individual players out there, especially some of the backups on the offensive line, that got thrown around. I mean, tossed around. And it just comes down to the fact that right now the Redskins on offense, they just aren't good enough to win in the NFL because of all the injuries. Took them from being kind of average to well below average, and so the teams they're playing have better rosters.
All right, but here's the thing that bothers me is that we were going with Beck. I mean, Shanahan said Beck's the guy. I'd stake my reputation on the fact that Beck is the guy, and then he takes Beck off and he says we're going to put Rex Grossman back in. And his explanation after the game was, if you have this many guys go down, you don't want to go with the inexperienced guy and throw him to the wolves. Well, if he was the inexperienced guy, then why wouldn't you have stuck with Grossman in the first place?
Well, see, that's a good point, because Grossman basically has a ceiling, and Shanahan didn't know fully what Beck's ceiling was. So he thought he'd give him a chance. And the problem is that Beck hasn't improved in ways that Shanahan hoped that he would improve. The Redskins offense, we talked about them not being good enough. Well, quarterback is one of those places. Because there have been plays there to be made all during these games and during this big, long losing streak. But the quarterbacks, both of them, have not hit the receivers that have been there consistently enough. I'm not talking about enforcing their will on the defense, making brilliant throws into tight windows. I mean just making the right read, throwing the ball to the right guy, and making the play, big, medium, or small, that was there to be made. And one of the reasons that Beck was sacked 10 times his last outing was that he wasn't seeing the field very well, or 2 weeks ago. Then last week, he checked down too much. I mean, he threw it 14 times to his running back, Roy Halou, and I think it's better to check it down to just move the chains than it is to take a sack. But at the same time, there were plays in his first or second read during some of those checkdowns that the receiver was open, and he just didn't throw it there. He just chose not to throw it there. So I think that's the reason that Shanahan thought it was better to have Rex Grossman in this game. Because with the offensive line in trouble and with the receivers struggling, at least he would know a little bit better where to throw it.
Big picture, though, Trevor, this team is bad. The offense is horrible, and this is the second year under Shanahan, and quite frankly, they've gotten worse offensively. Do you think he knows what's wrong? Do you think he can fix this? Or do you think that maybe, that Mike Shanahan really isn't the guy right now?
No, I think he knows what's wrong, but he can't say it. See, that's why when he said that he would stake his reputation, he was asked, will you stake your reputation on these two quarterbacks, Beck and Grossman? And he said, yes. What's he supposed to say? Well, no, not really. Both of these guys are awful. I thought McNabb would be our guy. But until we get somebody that can actually play in the NFL, we'll go with these two stiffs. You can't say that. And so what I don't think he can also say, or doesn't want to,
but
that we're not good enough. We don't have enough good players yet to overcome injury.
But is he part of the problem? Because he did go with these guys. They could have done something offseason. They could have drafted a quarterback. I mean, there are a lot of different things they could have done that they didn't do, and he said that these guys will be okay at quarterback, and they're clearly not.
Yeah, but again, I think he said that because he had to. But the thing is, remember this: this is a roster that's been neglected for 15 years. Draft choices traded away for aging veterans, aging free agents being signed. Instead of doing what the teams like Green Bay and Philly and Pittsburgh that remain good year in and year out do. Those teams draft well, and those draft choices then have the luxury of sitting on the roster behind starters and developing. So now not only the stars are good on those teams, but the bottom half of the roster, the special teams guys and the depth on those teams are in there, and the future starters are being groomed. The Redskins haven't had that correctly for a decade and a half, and it takes more than 2 years to get that depth. And so when they lost a couple of starters on the offensive line, for example, they've got nothing to replace them with. That's NFL caliber.
Well, the good news is
that's where we are.
The good news is, the Cardinals won yesterday, the Rams won yesterday, the Dolphins won yesterday. It looks like the Redskins are going to have maybe the second pick overall, or certainly a top 5 pick in the draft.
Yeah, the Redskins might not win another game, but they couldn't. Listen, the Dolphins came into this 1-7. They were competitive.
Well, the Dolphins are a better football team.
Yeah, they were. Of course, they were a better football team. You'd rather have the Dolphins roster right now on offense, wouldn't you?
Sure, absolutely. I'd rather have the Dolphins on defense, actually, as well.
Yeah, you'd rather have the 49ers roster.
Yep. Certainly
on offense, you'd rather have the Bills roster. I mean, that's where the Redskins are right now. It takes more than 2 years to build it. But you're right about that. With not beating a 1-7 team, the Redskins, with the schedule coming up, it was always backloaded. It was always easier at the beginning, tougher at the end. But they're on a 5-game losing streak right now. They may lose the next 7. It's possible.
Oh, man. All right. We'll talk to you on Friday.
Yeah. You're just a ray of sunshine, aren't you, Trevor? Thanks a lot,
Thanks
pal.
for telling like it is. We appreciate it.